So, you are interested in making your own Psytrance music. Well, there's a lot to learn, so today I'm going to start a series just for beginners where I'm going to explain all of the basics of all of the things that are involved in creating your own music. We'll start today off by looking at the software in which you write your music, which is called a DAW, that stands for Digital Audio Workstation. Now, there's many different variations of these kind of softwares out there. There's many different companies that make DAW software. In this video, I'm going to be showing you 4 different examples. So I'm going to be showing Ableton, which is my main DAW. I'm going to be showing Reaper, which is the DAW that I mix in. And I'm also going to be showing you Bitwig and FL Studio, which are also 2 very popular options. Now, when you start out and you have no idea which DAW to choose, I really recommend just choosing one of them, getting a little bit started, seeing if you enjoy the way that software works. And if there are annoying features or workflow issues, then you can change your DAW. There's a lot of demo versions available that you can usually test out for roughly 30 days, so you can use that time to make a decision on whether you like that particular DAW or not. I won't be recommending a DAW to you because they're all different and each one works in a particular way, so whichever one works for you is going to be dependent on how you like to work. But with all of that being said, we can actually start to look at what a DAW actually is. So when you open up a DAW for the first time, you're often presented with an empty project like this. There will probably be some file browser on the left side or maybe on the right side. There will be a main view in which you're doing most of your work. And then you'll find controls and buttons up above or sometimes down below. Now I'm immediately going to dive into the main window and ignore all of the smaller little details on the sides, and we're going to talk about the main window's main component, which are tracks. Here you can see this empty project starts off with 2 different tracks. You can see it's called Instrument 1 and Audio 2. And tracks inside of a DAW are what contain the sounds of your music. When you're going to be writing music, there's going to be a lot of different sounds that are all going to be combined together in what is essentially your master track or your final track. Now, the reason why we're using tracks is partially due to organization. It allows you to categorize all of your sounds. You can imagine that for each new sound that you're at, you're going to have a specific track dedicated towards that sound. And that also allows you to apply different effects and change certain properties of each individual track, thus for each individual sound. Now this will become much more clear once I actually start dragging in some sounds. So let's do that. I'm going to drag in a snare sample here, and you can see that this sample is just contained within a clip which sits on the track. You can move it around in time, so this will be the time axis, and you can hear when it plays that it's actually moving. And if I import a different sound, you'll see that it lives on its own track and I can move it separately to a different position. Now, obviously, you don't have to take every sound and put them on its own tracks. If you have 2 very similar sounds, like we do in this case where we have the 2 different snares but very similar snares, if we place them on the same track, they will be considered part of the same kind of grouping, and you'll be able to simultaneously modify the properties of both this snare and this snare together. So you can kind of think of it as your virtual axis being the groupings of different sounds that you have within your project. And that means that the horizontal axis will be time. This will be determining when the sound plays in time. So if I hit spacebar, which starts the playback, it will start to play the sounds. So now that we have sounds on the same track, we can start to modify their properties. So here in Ableton, you can do that on the left side, and there's just a few properties that you can change here. This is the volume, so that will determine how loud the sound will be. And this is the panning, which will determine if it's going from the left channel or if it's going from the right channel. Now, just the volume and panning is a little bit limited in terms of the properties that we want to modify. So in most DAWs, there's usually some kind of effect chain that is combined with the track, that is actually linked towards that individual track. So for this brief example, let's just say that we want to apply an EQ. Here you can see we have a very simple EQing device which allows us to change the high frequencies, the middle frequencies, and the lower frequencies. Now, you're probably familiar with the concept of frequencies, maybe in a little bit of an abstract way. We're going to talk a lot more about frequencies and also all of the other measurements that we're using for sound in the next episode, where we'll talk about all of the basics about audio. For now, I'm just going to keep it simple and just tell you that there is this correlation between the track and its effects. you can see that if I select this other track, that it does not have this effect. So this effect is dedicated towards this track, and therefore it will be applied to all of the sounds that exist on that track. The same was true, by the way, also for the volume. So for example, here in Bitwig, we can lower the volume of this sound here, and then you can see that that's separate from the volume from this sound. And you will see that down below here, this also updates. Now in some DAWs, like FL Studio, there's another part that you have to do. There's not a connection between these tracks that you have in the playlist where you place your sounds and in the mixer where you affect the properties of those sounds. So for example, your FL Studio might open up like this with an empty project, and you'll see that you will be given 4 different sounds that you can start with: a kick, a clap, a hat, and a snare. And these are all nicely routed to the mixer. You can see them insert 1, 2, 4. Volume starts to play in here, indicating that this kick is going through this mixer channel. Now I've placed a new snare on the timeline. This is a snare that's different from the ones that we saw before. And you can see that now a new device has been created. If I go to all, you'll see that it's underneath all of the other ones, but it's not linked to the mixer itself. If I play this, it just goes through the master and none of these individual mixer tracks here. So in particular in FL Studio, what you have to do is you have to link them to the track itself. You can do that through here, or if you open up the settings right here, you can assign to a free mixer track, and that will do it automatically for you. You can also do it through here if you want to. Now here in Reaper, again, to just clarify, you can see that we have our playlist track here, and down below we have our mixer track. You can see that it plays, that the sound is coming through here, and then when it plays, it's also going through here. In fact, these 2 tracks are linked, so if I change the name of this one, you'll see it updating down below as well. So now you might say, okay, that's very, very interesting, but that does mean that I need to work with sounds from others. Well, not really, because there's a different type of information that can be placed on a track. If I right-click here in Ableton, it allows me to create a bunch of different types of tracks. We're not going to worry about return tracks for now, but we are going to worry about a MIDI track. A MIDI track does not hold audio files, it holds MIDI data, which can be used to be sent to instruments, and then they will generate sound for you. We'll have a look into instruments in a little bit. But usually a MIDI clip opens up empty, and you can create a pattern, and then you'll see that there's some kind of piano roll that you can write your MIDI notes in. What this allows you to do is it allows you to say which notes should be played at what time. So here, as you can see, as I'm putting in notes, you'll see that the MIDI data is appearing above in the clip as well. And therefore, these timings correspond to these timings here. You have to imagine that this clip kind of zooms out to this full scale here, and that you're editing this whole pattern in just this window down below. So at any point in time, you're able to say which note should be triggered by the instrument. And you can see there's a little piano key in here, which corresponds to the note of the piano, which allows you to actually see which notes are being triggered. So that means that we need instruments to trigger them. So we'll take out a simple instrument here. In this case, I'm going to use the classical example of 3x oscillator. It's not important that you know what this does, nor do you have to even have it. If you don't have FL Studio, then you won't have this. So this is not important to know what this actually does. What is important is that we see that this also has a MIDI editor, or in this case a piano roll, that allows us to draw in the different notes at different times. And then we can play this pattern back to get our sounds from it. Now you may have been watching this video and you've been experimenting on your own to the side while you were in your DAW, and you might have found that you were not actually getting an output when you played that last example. And that may be because your DAW is not configured correctly. Like most pieces of software, there's a place where you can go into preferences and modify the different preferences that you want to have for your software. What's important for your DAW, and something that you should probably check, is that your outputs and inputs are set up correctly. Outputs allow you to send the sound to somewhere else, so for example to your speakers or to your headphones. And inputs allow you to take input from other sources. So for example, if you want to play guitar and you have an audio interface that you can record through, or maybe if you have a different program that sends audio from somewhere, maybe you have a different soft synth or a different instrument somewhere that you want to record from, then you can take that as an input. Now the reason why I'm saying this, because with a digital audio workstation, they're really meant to be used in a complex audio setup. So oftentimes they're designed with complex setups in mind, and you need to do a little bit of configuration before it really gets going. So for all of you out there jumping right in with the video, if at any point you don't get any audio, then this is the time to check your audio settings. And now we're on a tangent. I would also like to say, if at any point in time you enjoyed this video, make sure that you leave a like. And if you're new here and you want to see more of this series or more of the other tutorials that I make, then make sure that you're subscribed. So in Ableton, instruments live in the Instruments tab, and you just drag them onto a MIDI clip or a MIDI track to be able to play the notes with this particular instrument. And usually what will happen for these instruments is that some basic sounds have been provided for you. They have already been created. Because this instrument is used to create sounds, and for most beginners, they don't really know how to use an instrument yet, what you can do is you can usually browse the already made sounds and just listen to those. Now obviously you can start to experiment with some of the instruments and start creating your own sounds if you really want to. You can also start to experiment with the different sounds that you already have. Maybe you have some sample packs already downloaded. Sample packs being collections of different sounds that you can just import into the DAW and play with. And you can start to experiment a lot more and more and more, and you can start to enjoy some tutorials maybe. But you'll soon find out that the tools that your DAW has at its disposal and just the basic instruments that it comes with and the basic effects that it comes with are often not enough for what you want to do. And this is where plugins come in. And plugins are a whole world on their own. They're extensions to the DAW. So you can see that I have a tab right here for plugins. And if I open up the VST list, you'll see that I have a very big list of plugins. And then I go to VST3 and I have a bigger list still. But you don't need all of those plugins. In fact, I would say don't spend a lot of time at the beginning worrying and investing into plugins. There's literally hundreds of different developers out there making thousands of different plugins a year, and they all do different things and they all do it in their own way. But you can categorize them in a few different categories. Again, there's going to be a separate video talking all about effects, using them, and they are going to talk about all of the individual categories, how they work, how you apply them, and what you should listen for when you apply them. But a bunch of the different categories that we can name as just an example for you are compressors, equalizers, and reverbs. There's also instrument plugins out there which allow you to open up an instrument. For example, I can go into here, my VST2 plugins, and I can look for a particular instrument. Here I've opened up the Serum instrument, which is an instrument that I use quite a lot on my channel. If you have been a follower of my channel, then obviously you would have seen this. But in that case, then a beginner video is probably not necessary for you because I normally tackle more advanced stuff. Now, what I would recommend for you as starter plugins is that you get one big instrument that you can really learn. For example, say Serum, which is a very advanced soft synth, is what it's called. Other examples may be Vital, Phase Plant, Pigments, Omnisphere, but there's a lot more out there that you can choose from. Then I recommend that you get some kind of basic plugin bundle that does a bunch of the different effects for you. Again, there's a whole host of different companies. I myself use the Melda bundle. This is a massive bundle. It's quite expensive and it's horrendously complex, so I don't recommend that bundle for beginners. What I would recommend for beginners is the FabFilter tools. That bundle is a lot smaller, it's a lot more manageable, but it's very, very powerful, and it gives you all of the basics that you actually need, such as an equalizer, a compressor, a reverb, and a delay. But there's actually a bunch more plugins in there. Okay, so now you know how to add sounds to your track, either as a sound itself, as a sound file, or as an instrument. You know how to apply effects to them, you know a little bit about the effects that you're working with, maybe you have experimented a little bit with them, and you've started to write some basic melodies and a few basic ideas for a track. What you might find is that your track becomes very, very stale and very, very boring because over time there's not a lot that is changing. All of the setups that you have are static, nothing is moving. And this is where the last big piece of the puzzle that the DAW allows you to do comes in, and that's called automation. Automation is the idea that some of the parameters of the sounds, some of the parameters of the effects, or some of the parameters of the instruments can be changed over time automatically. So for example, say that I want to change the volume between this snare and this snare here. I can go into the automation tab here, click the volume, and you'll see a little line start to appear. I can create points on that line, which I can move up and down to change the properties. In this case, I have to turn off this snapping feature here, and then you can see that I can move this point around wherever I want, and therefore I can set the value of this property, of this volume property here, over time. And this volume will just follow the line. It will not actually show it, but as you can see, if I move this down here, you'll hear that this snare is a lot quieter than this snare because its volume is a lot lower. In fact, you can barely hear it. Now each DAW is going to do it a little bit differently. If I have a parameter like here, if I press A, you'll see that I get into automation mode. Now each DAW is going to do automation a little bit differently. For example, in Ableton, I press A and then I'll be in automation mode. You'll be able to see these lines here, which correspond to parameters. And then if I click, you'll be able to press and create your points like this. FL Studio, for all of its stock devices, allows you to right click on there and create an automation clip like this. This will create a clip in which you can draw your points. And if I decide to add an effect plugin into the mixer, for example by dragging this over here, if I want to automate any of the parameters of this plugin, what I need to do is right click on this knob here, and then here it will say the exact parameter that I'm modifying, and I can create automation clip along with a lot of other options that you don't have to worry about for now. Another few things that you should know is that there's standard system for copying, pasting and deleting. So I can hit Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I place this sound over here. I can select some time and I can duplicate it, either in the way that I just did, or if I select right here in Bitwig, I can duplicate this specific element over time and I can actually leave some space in between. Now this space in between is actually really handy because you can probably see that there's some kind of grid system in here. And that has to do with the tempo. The tempo of the track determines how fast your track plays. I've quickly just created a loop point here and will be listening to those 4 snares consistently looping. And then I'll start to change the tempo of the project so that you can hear what is actually happening. So we're going to be writing this music in form of the grid system, and the most basic form of the grid system is the 4 on the floor, which is what we just heard. 4 sounds spaced equally apart over 16 parts of this grid. Now again, when we're going into structuring, we'll talk a little bit about this grid, and when we're going into music theory and rhythm, we'll talk a little bit about this grid. This is all stuff for later episodes of this series. For now, just remember that when you're writing this track, you're doing it in this grid system, and to speed up or down the tempo of which the track plays, you change the tempo of the project. So you've been experimenting a little bit more and you've added a few extra sounds into the track, maybe a few of extra snares like we've done in this project. You set all of them onto a different track so that you can each set their individual volume. Now you would like to apply an effect to all 3 of them. How can you do that? Well, you might say, I'm going to go into my audio effects and I'm going to get the effect that I want, and I'm going to set up the setting that I want. Maybe I want a setting like this. I'm quickly going to hit this S button here, which is also a common feature of most DAWs that allows me to isolate it or to solo a track. And then I can hear what this effect is actually doing. I would like to apply this effect to all 3 of the tracks. Your first instinct would be to take the effect, hit Ctrl C to copy, go to the next track, hit Ctrl V to paste. And that will work, that will get you the effect on all 3 of the tracks, but there's a lot easier way to do it. We can take all 3 of these tracks, and then in this case, the shortcut is Ctrl G to group them. You can see we have a group here. Alternatively, you can do it by right-clicking and then group tracks. Now this group is also a track, so I can apply effects to them, and you can see we have a volume for it, we have a solo for it. You also have this enable disable feature. This just allows you to disable tracks so that you don't hear them, and we can apply our effect to the track over here, to the group, and now all 3 snares will be affected by this effect. Now there's another way in which that can be done. For example, in FL Studio, there's this kind of routing matrix down below here. You can see that we have this track going out and it comes back in here, and you have this knob controlling the volume at which it goes into this track. That means to group tracks, what we can do is we can send it to here. We can take our other track and also send it to here. And now this will be a grouping of these two tracks. One of the things that you can see is that this track is also going back into this master track, which is your output. Everything that you'll hear will at the end go through the master track and then out to your speakers. So we don't actually want to send it to the master track twice. We don't want to send it from here to the master track and to here and then again to the master track. We just want to send it to here, both of them, and then send this group to the master after we have added our effects to this group. So we can just disable this one, same for here. Then we can go into our track 6 and we can go into our effects browser and apply any effect that we want. So some EQing here, for example. Now both the kick, which is going into insert 1, as well as the clap, which is going into insert 2, will be affected by this EQ. And we can temporarily turn that off to verify that it's true. So believe it or not, that's everything you need to know about the DAW, at least for now. As I said, this is the beginning of a series, so you're going to be learning more and more as the series goes on. Now, if you're not a beginner and you're still watching this video and you're still enjoying this video, then one of the things that you might be interested in is this masterclass that I have. It's about 24 hours of edited footage of me making a whole Psytrance track from scratch. It includes all of the sound design, it includes all of the arrangement, it includes all of the mixing, all of the mastering. And I go into very specific detail on how I do all of the things that I do in the production. So if you're interested in that, make sure that you check out the link in the description. Also, if you are a beginner and you just saw that message and you do want the masterclass, this series that you're currently watching is actually designed so that the masterclass is a logical next step for you. So once this series is fully out and fully finished and you've watched all of the videos, you can immediately jump into the masterclass and check it out for yourself as well. For now though, what I recommend you do, kind of like a homework, if you want to treat this as an actual video lesson series and if you want to really work with it and try to learn from it, is I recommend that you just start experimenting with your DAW of choice. Maybe you haven't even decided which one you want to buy yet, and then you have a bunch of different options that you're weighing in. It's a good idea to just try to make a few basic ideas and a few basic tracks. While you're doing that, you can see if there's anything about the workflow that you don't like, anything that is annoying to you, maybe some features that you cannot find or something like that. What I would first of all recommend is to see if there's a forum out there for your specific software, for your specific DAW. Chances are that there is. You can either ask a question on that forum with the specific problem that you're having, or you can probably already find the answer because somebody had that problem before you. If you cannot find a solution there, then there's always production communities, like for example my Discord, which is linked in the description. And there will be tons of helpful people online that will be able to help you, not only through the communities that are around production, but also maybe through tutorials and other ways of learning. So I recommend that you just start your journey of production out and experiment a little bit, see which DAW fits you best, and then once you've made a decision on that, you can move on to the next video in the series, which is going to talk about all of the audio basics that you'll need for your production endeavors. One of the final things that I'll say is that you're probably not going to be writing the music that you'll like to write anytime soon. Music production is a very, very complex field. It's not something that you can just dive into and expect instant results. Therefore, I always recommend for beginners that if they have a plan of action, something that they want to tackle in their track, that they focus on that individual problem and that individual aspect that they want to tackle. Now, in the very early beginning, you don't really know what you're doing. So for the first, maybe say 20 tracks that you're writing, just try to write some interesting music and see what you can come up with just experimenting. Maybe you find a particular tutorial for soft synth that you like that you want to implement in your track. Maybe you find a mixing technique that allows you to combine two sounds together in a way that you enjoy. Maybe you're watching a production walkthrough or maybe a masterclass, which by the way is also linked down in the description below, and you want to implement a bunch of the tricks into your track. Whatever it is that you're doing, just focus on that one thing that you want to experiment with and try to keep it simple, try to keep it to one or a few ideas, and just focus on experimentation and making it fun to write some music. Don't put any expectations on yourself into terms of the sound quality or the overall composition of the track. Those are all things that are going to come later with much more experience. So for now, that's going to be the video. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, let me know by leaving a like. And if you're new here and you want to see more of this series and more of what I do, then make sure that you're subscribed. Also, if you have any suggestion for what I should cover in this series in the future, then let me know by leaving a comment or joining my Discord server and joining the discussion right there. For now though, this is going to be the video. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.